The Sun Devils didn't score a lot through the air last year, but I'm here to tell you that Troy Omeire is going to change that narrative all by himself.
You are Locked On Sun Devils, your daily podcast on the Arizona State Sun Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Richie Bradshaw, and I will be your guide for everything Arizona State Sun Devils. Shout out to my everydayers who are here every day, and thanks for making us your first listen of the day. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications wherever you're getting your podcast, and stay in touch with the show by following me on Twitter at RichieBrads36 and the podcast at LO_Sun Devils. Also, if you have not hit subscribe on YouTube yet, now's the time to do it. We're trying to get to 1,000 before the season starts. We are currently at 817. If we are able to get to 1,000, we will find some really cool way to end up celebrating that milestone together. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back into the show. Today, we are going to be continuing and very close to wrapping up our prediction series. We are taking a look at wide receiver Troy Omeire today, a receiver who I thought did not get his flowers last year for everything that went on with the offense. Omeire was someone that was rarely called upon, but when he was called upon, he stepped up to the plate. And he has a very realistic chance to go into this year as ASU's number one receiver. Now, if you did not check out yesterday's episode where we broke down Jordan Tyson, go ahead and check that one out, because I laid out a list of reasons why I think Jordan Tyson could be the number one receiver. Going into the year, I think it's Omeire's job to lose. But even if he's not the number one receiver, there's one thing I do know for Troy Omeire, and that's that this dude is a difference maker inside of the 20-yard line and is someone that I anticipate is going to find the end zone quite a bit this year. But with our prediction series, there's 3 stipulations that we need to go over. The first and most important, in my opinion, is, or not the most important, the second one's the most important, getting ahead of myself. First stipulation, this is based on the assumption that they are starting or in a significant role for the entirety of the season. This is, I could be talking about Joe Schmo, and I could say Joe Schmo is going to be a 1,000-yard receiver. That would be because we're looking at him as an individual. This is also an individual preview. This is the most important one, in my opinion. This is not affected by any other player. Yesterday for Jordan Tyson, I gave my predictions for him. The predictions that I gave for Jordan Tyson will not affect the predictions I'm giving for Troy Omeire. So if I say both these guys are 1,500-yard receivers, that doesn't mean I expect both of them to do it in the same year at the same time. It is a best case scenario, a worst case scenario, and then my overall prediction. That's the last stipulation. Is best case is the highest I could see, the worst case is the lowest I could see, and then my prediction is my own opinion. I'm not basing it off of anything except my own gut feeling. Now, that said, let's talk about Troy Omeire. We'll start with the fun conversation, and that is the receiving yards. What do we do with Sun Devils receivers this year when it comes to receiving yards? The biggest point of conversation has to be understanding what the offense is going to be asking of the wide receivers and of Sam Leavitt and the passing game this year. You have a running game, and I talked about this previously. There are 6 running backs in that room who you would be comfortable as your number one running back. They should, for all intents and purposes, run the heck out of the football this year. All 6 guys, you could justify getting significant roles. You could say that Cameron Scadaboo's number one, or Alton McCaskill's number one, or you go with the future of Kyson Brown or Jason Brown, or DeCarlos Brooks breaks out as a senior, or Raleek Brown turns into a superstar. You can go a million different ways in the running back room. When it comes to the passing game, there's a big question of what should you be allowed to ask out of Sam Leavitt in his first year in Tempe, a guy who only played 4 games last year for Michigan State? You got a brand new offensive coordinator with Marcus Arroyo coming in. There's a lot of changes. You're also missing number 1 receiver Elijhah Badger, who entered the transfer portal and is now at Florida. With all of those changes and new scenery for an offensive coordinator and your starting quarterback, I don't know what we can expect or we can fairly expect to see out of this passing game this year. So I don't know if ASU has a 1,000-yard receiver. I don't know if ASU has a 800-yard receiver or 700-yard receiver. Something I mentioned during the Jordan Tyson podcast was you can have a handful of guys that only have 400 receiving yards. But if you get like 3 or 4 of them and you collectively are just able to do enough through the air attack, you don't need a 1,000-yard receiver. And you don't need a 1,000-yard receiver to be your number 1 receiver. Elijhah Badger was the slam dunk number 1 receiver each of the last 2 years. He had 1,500 yards split in those 2 years. He wasn't a 1,000-yard guy, and you would never question his legitimacy to be wide receiver 1. So bringing it back to Troy Omeire, overall for projecting what he could be. Last year, he had 223 receiving yards. His season high, was 57 yards on 5 catches. He had one other game where he had 4 catches for 42 yards, one game where he had 3 catches for 38 yards and a touchdown. Every other game, he was 2 catches or less. He did not get a lot of volume in those games. And he wasn't this exceptional, deep threat for the team. He averaged 11.1 yards per reception. His season long was a 31-yard catch. He also had a 30-yard catch and a 27-yard catch. He can make a big play, but you're not going to be asking him to make a big play. And the reason I bring that up is because I don't know, depending on how big of a clip he's going to get with receptions, whether it's 40 catches or 70 catches, which we'll talk about, I don't know that it's going to be 14 yards per reception, 15, 16 yards per reception. I think that 11 to 13 is something that's going to be pretty realistic, especially given the offense. So in terms of receiving yards, unless he's getting 100 catches, I don't know that he's going to be a 1,200-yard, 1,300-yard receiver. I think 1,000 is possible. I just don't know if I would be leaning towards 1,000. I think the best case scenario here, the high that I have in my notes, is 900 yards. And that's a great season for Troy Omeire, especially with this being his last year of college football. Going out with a 900-yard season and whatever else he can accomplish in terms of receptions and touchdowns, that's all going to bode very well for him and the potential for him to play at the next level, whether it's NFL or UFL or CFL or AFL or whatever. He needs this kind of production to help get himself to that next level. And I think that this is entirely within the realm of possibilities for him, is around that 900 yards. But this is also an individual look here. This has nothing to do with Jordan Tyson. If I said Jordan Tyson was going to be a 1,000-yard receiver, I'm not insinuating that ASU is going to have 2,000-yard receivers. I'm saying that from a pure look at Troy Omeire, if he's the number 1 receiver for the entirety of the season, I think 900 yards, probably the best case. Worst case, lowest I could see, 400 yards. I don't think he's going to be worse than what he was last year, especially because there's a lot of opportunity that's up for grabs. 65 catches and 713 yards was what Elijhah Badger had last year. That's open game. 30 catches, 362 yards from Jalin Conyers, who is no longer with the program, up for game. You're talking about 95 catches over 1,000 yards. That's open season for Jordan Tyson, for Troy Omeire, for anybody else. There's no reason that Troy Omeire can't can't really seize a big role with the team. To me, if he doesn't, it would either be because he's just not able to get to that next step, or maybe he deals with an injury or something. Because the opportunity will be there for Troy Omeire, for Jordan Tyson, for whoever else. This is the 400 yards. Like I said, that to me speaks to like, hey, the offense isn't going to have a featured number one guy. We're going to have a handful of guys. That to me is what it more represents. My overall prediction for Troy Omeire, I'm going to say 700 yards. I am going a little more on the higher end here, and I'm saying that he is closer to what Elijhah Badger did last year with 713 yards. But if you're looking at it from the scope of number one receiver, that feels right about in the ballpark of what you would expect out of a number one receiver. You can also factor in maybe Jordan Tyson isn't a wide receiver one, but he is doing enough to help Troy Omeire get those one-on-one opportunities. That's what you're kind of looking at here with Omeire posting 700-yard season, which is a very good season. If you got that from Elijhah Badger in his last year at Arizona State, you'd still be happy with it, especially when you look at what this run game could be. You don't need a 1,000-yard receiver to tell the story of whether or not you are a number one receiver, whether you're an X receiver, whether you are the guy in the passing game. 1,000 yards is awesome. It's a great benchmark. To me, 1,000 yards is more relevant in the NFL than it is in college football. It's a sexy number for sure. Everybody wants 1,000 yards, but what you're looking for here with Omeire is just somebody that's able to take on a large role with the team and produce with it. 700 yards, it's still a good number, in my opinion, at least. But we're going to go ahead and transition. We're going to talk about the receptions coming up here in just a minute. What's the workload look like? Is he going to be high volume? Is he going to be closer to what we saw last year? We'll talk about it more in just a moment. This is the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to talk to you guys about our friends over at Game Time. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball and makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch, with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets. You can save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and other events. Their flash deals will allow you to save on exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. You can try the zone deals, where you save even more by choosing a section and letting Game Time choose the seats. They have an all-in pricing feature that you can toggle so you can see the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. You can get a panoramic view of your seat in the app before you buy, so you know what to expect when you arrive. Their lowest price guarantee means that Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference if you find tickets in the same section and row for less. And the Game Time ticket coverage means that your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Take the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Wherever you're getting your podcast, hit like, hit subscribe, turn on notifications so you get an update whenever we post new content. I appreciate you guys for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. Shout out to my everydayers who are here every day. And if you have not hit subscribe on YouTube yet, go ahead and do that. We are at 817 subscribers right now. We're trying to get to 1,000 before the season starts. If we are able to hit that milestone, we will find a way to celebrate. I don't know if it's an ice bucket challenge. I don't know if it's something else, but we will find a way to celebrate 1,000 subscribers. Back into our conversation now and taking a look at Troy Omeire, predicting his stats, and we're going to talk about the receptions. What does a workload look like for a player who had 20 catches last year? It was a very small sample size, but he looked good. I mean, there was times where Omeire looked like a true number 2 receiver opposite of Elijhah Badger. And ASU had an identity crisis at wide receiver last year. They started off the year with Xavier Guillory as the number 2 receiver. He looked very capable. He looked very quality. Disappeared in the second half of the year. ASU was trying to find anybody after that to complement Elijhah Badger. Giovanni Sanchez, unfortunately, wasn't able to break out. Melcon Stovall was very up and down. I am very high on Stovall going into this year, and we'll have to have a conversation about him later on. But Omeire, to me, was the one who stood out as a really, really quality guy to line up opposite Badger and give you validity in the passing game. And I thought that this was best displayed, honestly, I would say against Colorado. 2 catches for 42 yards and a touchdown. Only 2 catches, and I remember sitting there watching that game, and I'm like, I like Troy Omeire. He has got my attention. And he had a really good post-up touchdown that was the go-ahead touchdown for ASU before Colorado was able to drive down the field, or a game-tying touchdown, not go-ahead touchdown. They gave him an opportunity. He went up. He got it. And you would expect a guy that's 6'4", 215 to be able to go up and get those tough balls. And Omeire was able to do that. So now you go into this year, and you have 95 receptions that are up for grabs, 65 from Badger, 30 from Conyers. There's a lot there for anybody to grab. And Omeire will have some of the first dibs to be able to get those. So a best case scenario when it comes to receptions, if he is a true number 1 receiver, if he seizes the role and is the de facto guy, kind of like Badger was, I'll say 70 catches. I don't know if it could be higher. You would love it to be higher. 70 is a lot. Elijhah Badger at 65 last year. Next closest was Conyers with 30. That's a big drop-off. Badger had more than double the next guy. Omeire could find himself in a similar situation if Jordan Tyson or Melcon Stovall or Jake Smith, who is returning after missing last year, if none of them are able to step up and take over a big-time role for the team, you could see Troy Omeire become that de facto guy for the team. And that's not a bad thing at all. In fact, I think that could be a very good thing for ASU. Then you turn him into a bit of I don't want to call him a target hog, but a guy that you can just funnel the ball to through the air. He could make stuff happen for you. I don't know how efficient it would be in terms of yards per reception. Like I said, he had 11.1 last year. Based off of the high on both situations that I had, 900 catches for 70 yards, it'd be just under 13 yards per reception. I think that that's realistic. 70 is a heavy workload for him, and I think that's honestly a pretty good thing if you're able to get him into that scenario for you. Worst case scenario, I think that you're probably looking at what you had last year. I have in my notes 30, I think between 25 and 30. Like I said, I still don't think that he's going to be, I'm going to say 30. I'm not going to go 25. I'm going to say 30. Because like I said with the yards, I just don't see a scenario where he is matching what he did last year. Unless he is just not able to take that step forward. And I don't think that that's the case with Troy Omeire. The 20 catches he had last year, the 223 yards he had from last year, that was in a very, very, very unique role for him. He is probably wide receiver 1, no worse than wide receiver 2 to start the year. He is going to get a decent workload. He's going to get opportunities. He's someone who has shown that he deserves those opportunities. My overall prediction, I'm still going on the higher side here. I'm going to say 60. I'm going to say that Omeire is one of the guys that Sam Leavitt is going to really find a favoritism to throw the ball to. Again, he's a big body at 6'4", 215. Just put the ball up. Put it somewhere in his area code. Let him come down with it. He is capable of being that type of receiver where it just put it somewhere. Put it somewhere in his vicinity and let him do some magic with it. He is a very capable, very quality, very high upside receiver for this team. You get those guys the football. Omeire is someone that you're going to want to just give him as many opportunities as possible, because I think that there's big time opportunity when he does get those touches. And speaking of big time opportunity, we're going to talk about the potential for his touchdown upside. We're going to give a prediction for touchdowns, and then I'm going to tell you guys why he might be an absolute menace in the red zone this upcoming season. We're going to talk about that in just a moment. This is the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. One more time, wherever you get your podcast, hit like, hit subscribe, and turn on notifications wherever you're getting your podcast. A shout out to my everydayers who are here every day. Thanks for making us your first listen of the day. And subscribe on YouTube if you have not already. We're trying to get to 1,000 before the season starts. We are at 817 as of Thursday, July 18th at 10:35 p.m. Let's talk touchdowns. Let's talk the most exciting part of Troy Omeire and his game. And it's as this guy that can really just flourish in the red zone. He's already built to be that 50-50 guy. He plays with that mentality of being above the rim. Even with 20 catches last year, you watched him play and you were like, you just got to put it somewhere. Put it anywhere within arm's reach for him. And he's got a chance to pull it down. That's exciting. That's exciting to have that kind of player for the Sun Devils. With no offense to Elijhah Badger at all. I think that Omeire is a better pure red zone threat than Badger was. Badger, I will tell you, 5-tool receiver, beat you in just about every way. He is a better receiver than Troy Omeire. I don't think there's really debating that, but I think that Troy Omeire might have the edge over Elijhah Badger if you were to compare the two of them as red zone weapons. And part of that is just the unteachable size, but the other part is that Omeire plays like a center in basketball. That ball gets put anywhere near him, he's going to come down with it. He's not polite. He is not going to be buddy-buddy with a corner. He's going to go up, he's going to moss you, and he's going to make a play. When it comes to the red zone, I think you could have a monster here. In fact, my prediction, I'm going balls to the wall. I'm saying 10. Or not my prediction. My best case scenario, I'm saying 10. I'm saying that Omeire is going to be one of the leaders in the Big 12 Conference in receiving touchdowns. 10 receiving touchdowns. Putting that in perspective, that's more receiving touchdowns than ASU threw as a team last year. They had 8 passing touchdowns. I'm saying Omeire gets that by himself and then 2 more. That is how highly I put in esteem here for Troy Omeire as a red zone guy. This is a beast. This is a monster. Throw the ball up. Let the dude who's built like Goliath go up and get it. Bring it down. Put 6 on the board for ASU. You're also going to be looking at a situation where ASU is so deep in the backfield with power backs. Scannaboo, DeCarlos Brooks can put the absolute hammer. They can hammer you. They can absolutely crush you as downhill runners. You've got guys who can beat you on the outside too. You got guys who can do a little bit of everything. There's going to be such a great threat in the backfield that once you get inside the 20-yard line, if you want to throw it, you're going to have a decent opportunity to find one-on-one matchups. Omeire is someone that should be able to eat up those one-on-one opportunities. He does. He gets in the end zone. He scores. This offense is going to be humming. That being said, the worst case scenario, I'm sticking with the theme of I feel like last year is kind of like your bar. I don't know that he does worse than that. I'll say 3, which is matching what he did last year. He gets 3 touchdowns. I don't think it has anything to do with Omeire at that point. I don't think it has anything to do with the amount of time he's on the field. I don't think it has anything to do with the offensive play calling. I think at that point, it's just inefficiency through the passing yard or the passing game, which is what we saw last year. If he's not able to get in the end zone a lot, either they're struggling to move the ball through the air, or they are doing so good on the ground game that they don't bother throwing it. You can have ASU match 8 passing touchdowns again this year. I still feel confident Omeire's going to get close to half of them, like he did last year. 8 passing touchdowns as a team. He caught 3 of them, and he did that in a very minuscule role. He's going to be in a bigger role this year. He's going to be a top 3 receiver at worst. He's a quarterback's best friend. He's getting in the end zone, which is why my prediction, once again, on the higher side, I'm going 7. There's a part of me that wants to go a little higher, but 7's a lot. Again, you threw 8 last year. Even my prediction, I'm saying he almost matches that. Omeire's a beast, man. And I think you're really going to see this year that he might be the best pure touchdown threat that you have, which is where I want to end this podcast is, do the Sun Devils have a better touchdown threat than Troy Omeire? And is this dude a red zone menace? I think to put it simply, yes. He is a red zone menace. He's the poster boy, and he's the cookie cutter mold for what you look for in a big target, in somebody who can play above the rim, in somebody who can make contested catches, the 50-50 balls, turn into 60-40, turn into 70-30. That's Troy Omeire. Now that he has that box checked off, it's a matter of getting him the opportunity. Even if ASU doesn't throw the ball a lot this year, even if they are a super run-heavy team, which I believe they need to be, I think they should be, and I think it would be in their best interest to be a run-heavy team. You still have such a unique weapon on the outside. Somebody who just brings a whole new element to your passing game by putting up those jump balls. It'd be irresponsible to not use that to your advantage and not have somebody that can seriously just win at the biggest level of the field. Put the ball up, let him get it. He's capable of doing that for you. You get him the ball, you get him that opportunity. Is he the biggest touchdown threat? I think the only other guy that you'd have the conversation about is Scadaboo, who had 10 touchdowns last year. Outside of Cameron Scadaboo, I do not think there's another guy on this offense who could score more touchdowns than Troy Omeire. Who knows? Maybe you have a tight end breakout like Shimon Mateer or Jaden Fortier. Maybe Scadaboo turns into a bell cow again. Maybe DeCarlos Brooks is just a menace inside the 5-yard line and he just runs in touchdowns, or Kyson Brown does it. There is not a lot that will hold him back from being that red zone threat, from being a touchdown machine. As long as Sam Leavitt can throw the football accurately, Troy Omeire can turn those 50-50 balls, like we said, into 60-40, maybe even into 70-30. Give him the opportunity. If he takes that step forward, we'll see. For what it's worth, he's working with Hines Ward, who is one of the most physical receivers that football has ever seen. If there's a guy who can help Omeire unlock that next step to his game, feels like Hines Ward might be one of those guys. I'm very high on Troy Omeire this year. I don't know if the yards are necessarily going to be there. In fact, he could end up being like a 500-yard receiver. He's going to score touchdowns. I will be wrong on that. So recapping, my absolute best case scenario, 70 catches, 900 yards, 10 touchdowns for Troy Omeire. My worst case scenario, the lowest I could see, 30 catches, 400 yards, 3 touchdowns, which quite frankly you would still take. My overall prediction, I'm going to say 60 catches, 700 yards, 7 touchdowns. One of the finer seasons that the Sun Devils have had in the last several years, and putting him right there with Elijhah Badger in terms of production. What do you guys think? Am I way too high on Omeire, or do you think he is in for a breakout year? How many touchdowns is he catching this year? Drop it in the comments. Let me know. You can hit me up on Twitter at RichieBrats36, the podcast at LO_Sun Devils. But wherever you're getting your shows, hit like, subscribe, turn on notifications so you get an update whenever we post new content. A shout out to my everydayers who are here every day, and thanks for making us your first listen of the day. Like I said, guys, if you have not subscribed yet on YouTube, you should make that change. We're trying to get to 1,000 before the season starts. If we are able to hit that milestone, we will find a way to celebrate. I'm always open to suggestions on what you guys may think. We will be back again tomorrow. We are trying to wrap up this series for the stat predictions so that we can move forward. We're definitely behind on where we wanted to be this summer because I was down in the weather. We are going to bust the series out. Tomorrow we're going to be looking at wide receivers besides Omeire and Tyson. That'll include Jake Smith, Melcon Stovall, Caleb Black, anybody else. We're going to take a look at a couple of tight ends next week. We're going to take a look at the offensive line, and then we're going to move on. So I'll see you guys tomorrow. Until then, you keep it locked right here on Locked On Sun Devils.